All right. Okay. Shall we get going then? Thank you so much for coming to Mastering AI with Access Holdings. My name's Todd. I am the founder and chief AI officer of General Purpose. I think quite a lot of you probably already know us. We are an AI training company and we help upskill teams in how to make the most of AI tools. And we were very privileged to work at the end of last year with Access Holdings out in their Baltimore office. They actually had some really interesting stuff going on that we were really, really impressed by. And so we thought, wouldn't it be great to have them as a guest on the Mastering AI series to talk about what they've been doing? And I think it's particularly timely for those of you that were at the AI Pathfinder event a couple of weeks ago. There was the stat shared that only 27% of the PE people who were at that event felt that their firm's data foundations were good enough to support scaled AI adoption. And I think that that is something that Access have really got right over the last couple of years. I think that this is going to be a very interesting chat where we can explore a little bit about how they did that. So let me introduce my guests. I'd like to introduce Nik Kapauan, who is the MD of Value Creation, and Matt Treuth, who is the principal of Value Creation. Nik is kind of very focused on the kind of the AI side and building out that kind of infrastructure across the organization. And Matt's very focused on the data side. So hopefully between them, they'll be able to answer all of the questions that we might have. And it's worth saying that we would like you as the attendees to kind of ask questions as they kind of come to you. Please put them in the chat and then I will ask them to Nik and Matt. I've got some to kick us off, but feel free to ask questions as you think of them. So without further ado, let's get started. How did you come to working or thinking about AI and data as a kind of core part of Access's value creation process?
Maybe I'll kick off with that. And so first of all, great to meet, great to see everyone. Thanks for joining me on and share some of the stuff that we're doing with data and AI. It's incredibly important to us, right? So I think if you look at the importance of data, it's increasingly becoming a competitive advantage going forward. So that's both for our portfolio companies and then also for us. One of the things I lead is kind of our research function. So figure out what new industries we're excited to invest in. And we use data in a very programmatic way to understand where to play, what industries to participate in, what geographies to be in, what customers to target, right? Understanding what go-to-market process you should deploy in a given industry. All those decisions can be very much answered by kind of a good data foundation and understanding what works through data. So it's really important for us as a P firm for understanding kind of where to play, how to win, and then obviously for our portfolio companies, understanding what good looks like in their industry and driving growth that way. Yeah, so turn it up to Matt.
I joined Access about 2 years ago, and part of the reason that I joined was Kevin, who's our CEO's vision about using data as a competitive advantage. And so this has long been in the Access DNA. I think we've made some really good strides over the last year, which we can share here. But I think if you look at where we play in the lower middle market, these businesses generally don't have access to great data. And the vision of bringing together all of your endogenous data, all your exogenous data, putting it in one and really building data as a competitive advantage, that is something that has always been part of the vision from the top here at Access.
Nice. And one of the things that was really interesting to me was that you had done a lot of the kind of the foundational work to get this stuff right. So maybe before we kind of dig too deep, you could just describe a little bit what you've been doing with data at Access.
Sure. So where I'll start is this has been a journey for us. I'd say the vision hasn't changed in about 5 years, but what's really changed for us over the last year or so is that we've made all of our data together in a structured, usable format. So historically, we would ask our portfolio companies to go stand up a data warehouse and go build that from scratch and then come back. And a year or two later, right, we'll see where you are. Well, what we've changed here is that we've centralized the data ingestion and then storage. So for all of our portfolio companies, then financial information, the headcount information, customer information, your phones, right? All of those pieces of data of your business. And then we will put it through a standard model within Snowflake. Right? We also bring into that Snowflake model all the exogenous variables that might explain business performance. You can think weather for a car wash business, right? So what we've done is really just put that all in one place and then give it back to our portfolio companies. That allows them to use it for operational decision-making to actually run the business better, but then gives us the transparency to automate financial reporting, which we've done, right? So it's been about a 6-month journey here, and I think we're just starting to turn the corner.
Yeah, what I'd say on that too, Tom, is this stuff is particularly important for us. So a little bit of access, we're kind of lower middle market buy and build investors. So lower middle market means some of these were typically the first institutional capital going into these businesses, right? They're founder run, family led type of businesses. So they're coming in many cases with QuickBooks and nothing else. So they don't have the infrastructure, the tech stack set up to collect data and monitor the business and have KPI dashboards to see what's going on. So we need to put that in place and buy and build. So we're constantly our car wash platform. We have 250 locations now. We started off with 16 and we added a bunch of regions. So in that buy and build M&A context, you're working with multiple regions, multiple systems. Data is increasingly fragmented across, functions and regions and different businesses. And that gets even more fragmented over time as you keep adding on more infills to the platform. So kind of just given that often the low data system maturity coming in and fragmentation that's created through a buy and build strategy, it just becomes so important for us to have kind of that consolidated data view across the whole kind of enterprise. And many thanks to the work that Matt and his team has done in kind of building that out for us, taking huge leaps in the past 6-12 months.
Great. And I was wondering, Matt, if you could just bring it to life for 2 seconds, really kind of show the value. When we were kind of with you, you were telling me about your kind of car wash platform and how you'd taken that kind of exogenous data and it had allowed you to kind of understand things about that business that even the management team didn't. Perhaps you could tell that story just to give a bit of color to the people listening about
Sure.
why you should want to do this.
Sure. So when we think about our businesses, there are things we can control and we can't control, right? And part of the idea here is that we want to be able to isolate the variables that we can't control so you can drive better business performance. We made a design decision when we built our data warehouse here is that we are going to start at the transaction level, the most granular level of data we possibly can, because that is what it ultimately allows us to have insights out of that data. I think some folks will bring in a summarized level of data and maybe total revenue or revenue by brand. Our view is go all the way down to the transaction level. What that allows us to do is isolate very specific attributes of performance, right? So we can get all the way down to an individual store for a given day, right? A member versus non-member transaction, right? And we can use that data to layer on things like the weather, right? So if we look at a car wash in Phoenix, right, we can tell you the dollar impact of light rain, medium rain, trace rain, sunshine, snow, or not necessarily snow in Phoenix, but cloud cover. And we can get to a much more informed conversation about what is the impact if you strip out weather, for example. So then we're not talking about the weather, right, in our meetings with management. We can talk about the things that are actually within our control that can drive business performance.
Nice. And Nik, I believe you kind of co-wrote a paper with one of your other colleagues around using machine learning to select locations for your portcos. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, we use data for a bunch of where to play stuff, right? What industries you want to play in, within those industries, what regions you want to play in. So ultimately, we're looking for regions with a supply-demand imbalance, right? where we can take advantage of that, where you can invest and take advantage of that imbalance. So mapping that out in geographic markets is really important. So for example, dog daycare, what are the markets where ultimately you're trying to identify markets where we have a lot of pets and not a lot of dog daycares to serve those pets. So there's no really great single database of where all the pets in the US. So you kind of have to figure out proxy variables. So what are the type of consumers that are more likely to own pets? Not only that, which are the pet owners that are more likely to use doggy daycare services? So when we did the analysis, we found out, okay, it's a bit of a barbell. We have younger, pre-kid millennials living in high-rise multifamily and dense urban centers, right? That's one kind of core demographic that would use doggy daycares, have a high willingness to pay for that service. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have maybe families, their kids have moved out, and then they have pets and they really want to use a dog daycare to kind of socialize their animal, either to socialize their pet. And so again, we identified where are the demographics where are the regions where that demographic is growing, because that's where you'll have your highest willingness to pay kind of dog daycare customers. And then when you kind of map the supply side over that and you find locations with, okay, there's not a ton of doggy daycares in this region based on the population of pets that we infer is in that region, and the locations that are actually there have high prices and long wait times, and then you're finding really good regions to locate your doggy daycare business. So that's just one example in one of our more recent Fund 2 portfolio companies. But that's the type of thinking and analysis that we do in kind of all of the regions. What are the markers of demand? What are the types of customers you want to go after that have the highest ones to pay, highest growth rates for the service that you're investing in? And then trying to understand which geographies that you want to locate in based on that. So it's just an example of saying you have a decision you have to make when you're an investor. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to invest? And data is, if you have enough data, you can make a pretty good answer to that decision.
Nice. And I think this is really, really interesting. You've obviously got some kind of great kind of capabilities internally, but Nathaniel has asked, okay, how do you actually scale this across the portfolio? Isn't your data team a bottleneck? And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that, and maybe about the Access Acceleration Center and the work that you're doing around that, because I think that's very interesting too.
Sure. So a couple of points there. If I think about that centralization versus decentralization decision, really the trade-off for us was time to value. So by having these pre-built models, a pre-built financial model, right, we can stand up a new portfolio company in 3 days, like 3 days to about 2 weeks, so somewhere in there, depending on their systems, right? Historically, that would take us maybe 6 months if we're going to build that from scratch. So just the time to value is the big differentiator for us here. And then we use tools like Fivetran as a managed integration service. So if NetSuite changes a schema, I don't need a data engineer sitting there to fix that for us. And then once we're in Snowflake, we're going through a standard transformation process that does not need engineering attention unless we're adding new systems, adding new types of data to the data warehouse. So we've tried to design it in a way that is as low touch as possible. But the other piece of this that I think is important is that we do segregate out each portfolio company's data. And so if they want to work on top of that, if they want to do additional data engineering on top of that, we give that back to the portfolio company. So our approach here means that we do the baseline, and then we're able to share that back, and the portfolio company can continue to build on top of that.
Yeah, and to answer the second part of your question, Tom, on the Access Acceleration Center, A2C, we like our acronyms around here. but we call it the Access Acceleration Center, but it's really our in-house value creation capability. So we have a data science team, we have a lead gen team, we have a data team, and we have all these capabilities in-house, and that really helps us move faster. So versus a peer firm that might hire a consulting team for each, or an engineering team for each portco to stand up their data platform. We built that at the core, and it's an asset that we have, and we can deploy that really quickly under the process that Matt just talked to. We deploy that really quickly for all new portfolio companies. Similar to our approach to strategic planning, similar to our approach to core tech stack, right? We have a standard, everyone uses NetSuite unless there's a good reason not to, with a standard kind of configuration, and that feeds into our data platform, and it lights up BI dashboards right away because it's a data structure that we've set up in advance. So through the A2C, having a lot of those capabilities and assets kind of at the core centrally that we deploy across all portfolio companies really helps us move faster.
And just to add on to that, usually what we see is if we build something at the A2C for one portfolio company, the rest of the portfolio companies also could use it. And so what we try to do is build out standard analytics, things like customer analytics, predictive forecasting, a store analytics dashboard, and then any other business with similar characteristics, we can just lift and shift it because the architecture is standard.
Cool. That's really interesting. And maybe we can get kind of into the nuts and bolts for a second of how you actually get the port to kind of do this properly. I mean, the reason general purpose exists as a business is because you can provide people with a tool and they won't necessarily use it properly without some additional support. How did you get from a point where you said, okay, we want people to use NetSuite, to a point where you had all the data flowing up in the way that you were then able to start doing these kind of incredible value adds?
Yeah, so we made a key decision as a firm that we're going to work towards a standard tech stack. So Nick mentioned we use NetSuite as a standard, Salesforce or HubSpot. We use UKG generally. And just given where we play in the market, usually we're moving a business off of QuickBooks, and NetSuite is a very logical next step given the growth profile that we're looking to put behind the business. So we will do that work over the first 6 months of owning the business. And then I think one of the key aspects here of how do we get the portfolio companies on board, it's really leading with value. So what we asked at the start of the project, we're going to send you a connection card. It's for your admin to click and log in, and gave us the permissions to bring the data that we need out. And then I go back 3 or 4 months later and say, here is all of your structured data. It works, right? You have access to it. And so we try to not go back to our portfolio companies until we had real value to show.
And I guess this probably makes you more opinionated as a PE firm about your portcos tech stacks than a lot of PE firms are. What's your kind of opinion on that? Do you think that that's kind of the role that PE firms need to be taking going forwards, or do you think it's okay to still be hands off?
So I personally think that if you are hands off, you don't have a strategy around this, you won't get the data that you want. And the way that we view it is there's probably 60 to 70% of a systems architecture for a portfolio company that can be similar across industries. So like your back-end finance, your HR system, your payroll, your CRM systems. And then where we don't have as strong of a recurring playbook is the industry specific systems. So those we're going to look to the management team and the operators who really know how those systems work. They think point of sale system for a doggy daycare, right? We're not going to be experts in that. And so we kind of have a little bit of a split approach there. But ultimately, if you want the data to be structured and you want to see it, you want your management teams to be running a business using data, I think you do have to have a standard playbook there.
Yeah, and I just add to that where we are fairly opinionated on tech stack and other things as a sponsor, and it's less about we're right, you are wrong, but in many cases, the teams that we're partnering with on in the portfolio, they're looking to us for advice, suggestions on what is the right tech stack, what does good look like from a digital marketing perspective, what does a good HR function look like, finance function. It's just really a function of where we play in the economy, or they can be US the lower middle market type investors, where these companies coming in don't necessarily have a great view on how do I build a finance function, or what do I do with AI? What is AI? So part of our process when we partner with new platforms, we call it destination planning. It's our approach to it, strategic planning effectively, but we sit down with the operator and we align on, okay, this is what we think good looks like in this industry. This is the type of scalable, growing company that we want to build, right? It plays in these markets, it targets these customers, it has this kind of value proposition. How do we get there? And we'll build that roadmap together. And part of that roadmap, of course, is what's our data architecture? What's our tech stack look like? And that's stuff that we're stacking hands-on and aligning from before we even close on any transaction. In many cases, the operators, or in all the cases where we partner with folks, the operators are excited to have that discussion and are kind of looking for that best practice because they want to grow their business and scale it as well.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. And I think this probably relates to James's question of when the time comes to exit a business, how do you think about so much of that capability is kind of coming from Access? How do you kind of get that business ready so that when you're no longer there, they're kind of self-sufficient in these capabilities?
Yeah, I'll answer kind of philosophically, then Matt can take the specific data piece, but everything is kind of lift and shift into the portfolio company. So we have a lot of capabilities in-house that we deploy so we could get value out of the gate. But then over time, we want to call it the first 18 months, 24 months, we want to transfer those capabilities into the business. So for lead gen, for example, we have an in-house lead gen, have a digital marketing team that'll run campaigns and drive. You put that on top of a portfolio company's kind of go-to-market function will immediately drive leads into the business that they convert. Over time, we're going to transfer our tech stack to the portfolio company. We're going to train business development reps who sit underneath our folks, but then they're employees of the portfolio company. We're going to lift and shift our sales force configuration into the portfolio company. So it's their capability going forward, similar to data, but we've kind of found that approach that works best. I think we call it build, operate, transfer. So maybe we stole that from McKinsey, but we'll build those capabilities in-house, operate it for value right out the gate, and then over time transfer that to the portfolio company. So of course it's valued as part of that portco on exit.
And so if we take an example of we close a new platform acquisition, rather than put a job spec out for a CIO or a VP of IT that's going to ultimately go build the data side of this platform, we will do that through the A2C within the first 2 to 3 months of owning the business so that the management team has better data and we have visibility. And then from there, right, we will hire through our ACE program. So it's Access Creating Executives, where we will hire a data ACE and put them in that business. And we will slowly transition the ownership of data engineering, data analytics into that business so that when we do exit the business, they fully have the capability and are self-sufficient. And one of the key design principles of all of this as we built this out was that we had to be able to seamlessly carve off a business from this architecture and send it away, right? And so that was one of the aspects of why we chose the Snowflake architecture that we did, that we can essentially peel off any portfolio company and they get the architecture in a standalone way that facilitates an exit.
Super interesting. And the thing that I really like about the kind of the ACE program, a general purpose, we're really focused on people, and it's all kind of about getting people to have the right skills, having the right kinds of people. And it seems the kind of a core part of the kind of self-sufficiency comes from finding those right people and apparently doing some kind of form of upskilling. I think that's really interesting. In fact, I'd love if you could kind of like just talk a little, because I'm not sure I've really come across something similar, what exactly that looks like, what you are trying to create when you are putting people through that program, I think would be really interesting.
Yeah, so maybe about the architecture. So you mentioned the Access Acceleration Center earlier, A2C. So then the A2C have a number of pillars, right? A platform which maps leads, which is all about tech stack and data and financial reporting. We have AI, we have organic growth, inorganic growth, talent. Right? We have all these strategy, we have all these pillars. Each pillar has their own, call it ACE role. So for the strategy pillar, for example, we'll hire folks, call it 2 to 4 years out of a McKinsey or BCG or similar firm to serve as a chief of staff or a head of strategy of a portco. Within the M&A pillar, we'll hire a corp dev ace within that pillar. And within platform, we have these data science aces and technology aces. So within each pillar, we have these ace roles that are spec to really learn our playbook, learn our tech stack, learn our approach for doing things, but they are employees of the portfolio company. So think of across the board, these aces, think of them as kind of elite, mid-career or early career talent, 2 to 5 years out of business school. So that type of profile. So very much kind of doers, right, in the business that are amazing leverage for our executive teams. So they'll come with us. In many cases, they'll sit with our team, learn our process, learn our tech stack, but then they'll transfer to the portfolio company after 3-6 months and really be kind of amazing leverage for the portfolio companies. Our ACE program is by far our best kind of reviewed, rated program among our executives. When they learn about this thing, they keep onboarding ACEs. And in some of our portfolio companies, we have half a dozen different ACEs across the different pillars, really driving value.
That's really, really cool. It's kind of, similar on a much smaller scale when we're trying to kind of put in place kind of AI champions networks within organizations and trying to get those people exactly same kind of candidates that are actually going to drive forward AI adoption within the organization, but you're doing it on a business-wide scale. I think that's really, really cool. Very, very interesting. Sheetal has a question. How do you decide what data is essential to know for the portfolio versus what is meaningless? How are you kind of deciding across everything what you care about? Do you have any kind of thinking around that?
Sure. So I think back to design principles, one of the design principles here is that we likely don't know every single piece of data that we'll ever need, right? So our approach is let's bring it all, right? Storage is cheap. That is no longer an inhibitor for us. And so the way that we've architected our data structure here is that we bring the most granular level of data that we can. We do not bring things over that would be PII or sensitive data, things that we simply just don't need in a data warehouse. But when we're talking about the scope of data, if it's a business system and there's transactional data, customer data, headcount information, phones, whatever it is, we want all of the data, and then we can build from there. So we've gone through an exercise of map out all of the metrics you would want to see on every single business. Let's tie that back to the data source, but let's not limit ourselves and just bring over just that data, because we don't know if we're going to want more other metrics. Really, we want to make sure we're bringing over everything.
And I think that's a fairly differentiated part of our approach versus how I've seen other firms do it, right? Versus kind of a monthly or quarterly reporting package where there's certain KPIs that the portfolio company reports on. We're connecting directly to the source systems and pulling in transaction level data. So that's I feel like fairly unique way that we do portfolio monitoring, but it's been really effective and powerful for us.
Do you think that the ability for portfolio companies to do this could almost become a criteria that you select upon, or maybe you already select upon? Do you look at kind of certain types of companies and say it's going to be harder to kind of get that kind of data from it, and therefore it's not for us? Or are you kind of confident that you could do it with any business?
And I think of it as it's a competitive advantage for us. And when we look at industries, I think we generally like to play in areas that have tech debt, for lack of a better word, because if the target we're looking at does, I bet you their competitor down the street doesn't have great data either, right? And so we see it as it's really a way for us to differentiate and outcompete.
Interesting. Very interesting. Classic PE question here again from Nathaniel. Can you give a specific case study where this centralized architecture has driven revenue or EBITDA growth? Getting straight to the numbers.
Yeah. So I won't share too much specifics about the portfolio itself, but I'll give some use cases. Things like monitoring over time, right? When you're running that across 250 locations, right? We've built AI agents on top of hourly hours data so that it will spit out and tell someone, hey, you're incurring more overtime at this specific location. Here's the GM that runs that location. So it's enabling management to take action on that, right? Another example that we're working on is competitive pricing. So we use Snowflake as the central data repository, but we're able to go out and find the pricing of all of our competitors. Right? We can scrape, we can find that through any means that we can, and we store that and we build a longitudinal data set of pricing data for every single unit that we can find. That lets us know how my price versus my competitors, are my competitors raising or lowering price? And do I have new entrants into the market that you might not be able to know at scale, right? The other areas that I think are, it's not as much on the portfolio company side, but it's the time to do financial reporting. We see financial reporting now probably 5 to 6 days earlier than we would historically. And just moving people out of Excel packs and into kind of direct and logically driven data warehouse, the accuracy and the understanding of what is EBITDA, for example, is always a classic PE question. But we have the answer to that now in a way that's much more transparent and a lot quicker.
Nice. So we've got roughly 10 minutes left. So if you would like to ask a question, please do drop one in the chat. I'll take a couple of more. But I was wondering, we've got a bunch of stuff that you've done so far that seems like it's already driving some good value. What's next? What do you think this enables?
Yeah, I use this. If you think about kind of agentic and AI, that's a big value creation theme for us, right? If you think about the value of this data, you have the machine learning stuff, which is some of the examples that Matt said already. You have these predictive models that are trained on the data to help you make better decisions faster. Right? What customers to target because they're at risk of churning, how to set your price, what to cross-sell to what customer, how to forecast demand so you can staff properly. Right? That's all the ML-based stuff. I think those are mature technologies with proven value that have been creating value for decades. I think this new wave of tech that we're getting into is on the agentic, the LLM front. And to me, the value proposition there is around workflow automation and how those things they're already pre-trained, so you don't necessarily need your data to train them. We are looking at kind of fine-tuning models with our data, but these models come largely trained already. But the value proposition of agents and LLMs and that kind of stuff is that they can act on your data that you already have organized. So in some cases we're feeding our data warehouse using agents where we have a deal automation agent that's evaluating deals and storing benchmarks in our Snowflake database. We have a research agent that's scoring industries and monitoring how that industry changes over time and storing all that longitudinal data into our database. So you can have agents kind of feeding your data, and then you have agents kind of acting on top of that data. I think that's to answer your question, looking forward, I think that's where a lot of the opportunity is for us. So we've already done a lot of automation on kind of the research front, top of the funnel deal evaluation. I think going forward, you could imagine building agents to do quote unquote kind of IC decision support. So being trained on all our historic LOIs and term sheets and investment IC decks and making recommendations on should we advance in an industry, should we advance in a particular deal, what are the terms that we should offer for this particular deal. So to me, looking forward, that's where I'm excited to start thinking about. Can you start using AI and agents to help you make better IC level investment decisions based on this corpus of data that you collected over time?
Two points to add on to that. One, I think we're really starting to turn the corner on using AI to enhance your data quality. We had an example with one of our portfolio companies where we had 30,000 customers that needed data enrichment. And we're able to do that in a way that you can do that in 6 hours using some of the functionality that we have in Snowflake versus weeks of someone doing that. So I think the next step for us is continue to focus on data quality, but then we're going to be in a world where people have so much data now. And I think really the benefit is that AI can help you focus, it can go through 250 stores across 20 variables per store and pick out what are the items that are most desiring or management attention. And it really lets us focus better. And so I think over the next year, that's going to be our push is how do we use AI on top of this data set to give the 5 things that our management team should focus on and really allow them to operate better.
That's really great. So it kind of preempts the question that I was going to ask with the kind of portfolio value creation lens. How do you think about kind of AI and the risks and opportunities to the kind of the portfolio as a whole? And what are you kind of trying to do to take advantage of and mitigate those at kind of portfolio scale?
Yeah, I break up AI into those 2 pieces, machine learning, right, which is AI to make better decisions faster. And that's stuff that we're doing kind of day in, day out. We have a data science team that's building these predictive models. And then we have the whole world of agentic, which is workflow optimization. Can we rethink our business processes? Can we re-engineer our business processes and organizations in an agentic way to really take advantage of this technology? The way that and Matt's been leading some of this work too, the way we think about that is really understanding kind of the current workflows in the business mapping process. Just like data is so important to machine learning and predictive models, process, I think is equivalent way to think about enabling agentic value creation. So really mapping out our end-to-end processes, taking a domain, the revenue cycle or your operations processes, imagining what those look like kind of in an agent native future state, and then picking your specific, figure out what initiatives along that future state process you want to start with, and then building kind of the agents to create value there in an automated way. So that's a journey that we've been on for, call it, the past 6-9 months now with our portfolio companies. And the vendor universe is really confusing. The technology is always changing. It's a lot of noise out there in the market. There's a lot of marketing. So part of our role, part of the role I see us playing at the A2C Central, is being able to cut through that noise, really understanding where the value is, really helping portfolio companies make strategic and build versus buy decisions, and how to take advantage of this. But really, I think it just all comes down to, okay, what's your process? What can this process look like in the future using kind of in an agent native way, building the business case, being religious about value and value capture, and then and picking your spots.
We've got about 2 minutes left. So I was wondering if you could perhaps share, if you had one bit of advice each for someone in PE who's interested in this stuff, but perhaps their firm is at the start of this journey. They haven't actually kind of done it. Where should they start? What should they do? What would your kind of one bit of advice be?
For me, I think I don't know where AI is going, and I don't know where we'll sit in 6 months and how good Claude will be at that point. But what I do know is that having your data in one central place is the best way that you can enable AI in the future. And so part of the learnings that we had through this process is just getting your data together in one place. It is not as hard as it was, call it 3 to 5 years ago. There are tools out there that allow you to do this more quickly and at a lower cost. So even if you don't have a 3-year AI roadmap, I would start on that piece of work of how do we get our data into one place so that we can build on top of that, because all roads will lead you back to that kind of first step of getting your data together.
Yeah, and I'd add more of a mindset thing. Just be curious. The landscape is changing. Be interested in this stuff. Listen to podcasts, read articles. Keep your ear to the ground, because the ground is shifting under our feet constantly. So just being curious and constantly learning as this whole world of AI advances is a good way to keep a pulse and know where the value could be.
Well, amazing. That was so great. So interesting. Thank you so much. And where can people find you if they would like to follow you more, hear more about what you've got to say?
accessholdings.com. Matt and I are both on the profiles. They could reach out. Wish there was a better answer. Subscribe to my podcast.
Well, you've got podcasts, right?
We don't have anything like that.
Yeah, I think you can follow the Access Holdings LinkedIn. Most of our content flows through there. And then obviously Nik and I available at LinkedIn, or we can share our emails after as well.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I've learned a bunch, and I'm sure everyone else has as well. And yeah, stay in touch, and hopefully we'll have you back in a year's time to hear about all the amazing things that you've done so far. You'll be so far ahead that we won't even recognize it. Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to everyone for attending. Hope you enjoyed it. Please stay on our mailing list, and you'll be invited to other similar type events in the future. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.